In this video, we are going to be installing my new Ducabike slipper clutch and new clutch plates on my 2015 Ducati Panigale 899. So the first thing we're going to do is drain the oil. So we'll drain the oil out of the bottom here, get all of it out, give it plenty of time to get all of the oil settled out of it, and then we'll start pulling apart the clutch cover so we can get to where we need to install the new parts. The drain plug on the Panigale is a 14 millimeter. So grab a 14 socket and break it loose. All right, so now that we've got most of the oil drained out, I'm gonna leave the pan here to keep catching those drips as they keep coming. There's a little bit of oil left in here still. It's gonna take a while for it to drain out, and a lot of it's actually gonna come out, I'm expecting, when we pull the clutch cover off. But for now, I'm gonna start moving on to pulling the clutch cover off, and to do that first, at least in my case, I have to pull off this clutch cover crash protection. You might not have one of these, so some of these bolts on here may not correspond to exactly what you have. Just take a look at it and you'll see which ones are gonna need to come out. Okay, there we go. All right, so now the next step is to start cracking loose all of these bolts along the side here. They are an 8 millimeter. So I grabbed an 8 millimeter socket and I'm going to start pulling them out. I'm hoping, really hoping, that I don't have to pull off the exhaust because I've done it before and it's a pain. I also might have to pull off this rear set. Probably will, but we'll see. So this is actually getting kind of fun now. I'm pretty sure that I have to pull off the muffler cans themselves in order to get to this bolt here, as well as potentially even to pull the clutch casing off. All right, so there is it's a pinch bolt and a bolt up here and a bolt down here that hold on this rear set. And it pops off. So to get the muffler cans themselves off, I got a number 6. And there is a 6 mil bolt hanger that is mounted to the can, and it comes up and the bolt is right here. So pulling that off. Got that right there. So this same bolt over on the other side, I'm gonna take off now. It's just the same exact location holding the other can. Okay, so the next step is to remove the nut right here, and there's one on the other side. This is a number 8. Not a lot of information here. There is that nut and the washer. It came off of there. I'm gonna pull the same one off on the other side now. There's one. Now I want to be able to wiggle the exhaust can off of here. And there's that other spring. I might actually need to pull the spring off of this one too, which is easy. Okay, so I just wiggled it around and the union here on the exhaust just came loose. So now I'm going to try to be pushing it back this way, and I think that's gonna do it. Oh, there we go. Okay, got the right angle at it, and it came off. Man, this exhaust is heavy. I'll pull this one off too. It's gonna help give me a little bit more room. Okay, now that we've got the exhaust off, we've got all kinds of room for activities in here. Really didn't want to have to pull the exhaust off, but I think it was probably the only way. So now I can get to this last bolt here. The bolt at the very top looks like this. It's kind of a, I don't know how you even call it, a two-stage bolt. This one goes into the engine itself. This one is used to secure this bodywork and this stuff in here. Okay, so I just pulled, this is the ECU here, released it, and now I have one more screw here that I can see. So I'm going to put this back here so I know where it goes. And got a screw, one screw here. Okay, I'll put that with the others. All right, so that looks like it's going to allow me access to these top two bolts, so that's good. That's what I needed. All right, so now we've got all of the bolts all the way around the side of the clutch cover here removed and bagged up so that I don't misplace any of them. I think it's time I can actually start pulling this off. It might be stuck on here a little bit because of this, this gasket maker here, but we're gonna start working it loose. I expect oil to come out of it as it starts to come loose. So I've got my oil pan down here at the bottom to catch any of it. But let's start pulling it off. Or trying to. Okay, so I just consulted the shop manual on how to remove this, and it seems like I've got everything correct. I just need to tap on it with the rubber mallet to break this seal loose. So that's what I'm going to do. There we go. All right, now I got it cracked loose so I can get a screwdriver in here and help kind of twist it out. All right. There we go. Don't know what that is, it's falling out. We're back over here on the bike. This is the OEM clutch basket and clutch discs and everything. So first thing I need to do is to remove them. I've got 5 bolts right here. They are a 5mm. So I'm gonna start by cracking them loose, back them out, and after that, all these clutch discs should come out right behind it. All right, so they came out really easy. You'll see they came out with a main spring, the bolt, and the cap that the bolt sits down into. I don't know what that would be called, but kind of a seat for the top of the spring. let's start pulling pieces off here. There goes our front plate, looks good. All right, so in the middle, or the center here, is a nut. Is a 32 millimeter, right in the center of the clutch here. You'll notice it will spin. Oh, it actually came off. I actually didn't think that was going to work, but it either did or it did a bunch of damage. About to find out. All right, there is the nut that I needed to remove. There we go. All right, so we've got the internal clutch basket here removed. I got it cleaned up with a rag here, and now we are at the actual starting point of where the Ducabike slipper clutch installation directions start. The first thing it says is to use the original OEM, it calls this a disc. And it says put this on first. This will slide right over into position. Now this, when I pulled it off, was stuck to the back of the clutch basket itself when I removed the clutch. Step 2, they said take the spring, is what they called this. This came from in the Ducabike kit. And you see it has a concave side and a convex side. The concave side, it says, goes out, facing the flange. And it shows it on the picture facing out. So we'll put it in like that and move on to the next step. Now the next step, according to the directions, and I quote, put the 6 balls, comma, and rotate to check for smooth movement. The pictures look like the intent is to just put these 6 ball bearings here at the bottom of the ramp, which seems right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which means I have an extra one for some reason. And then the next step is going to be mating it up with this. You see the ramps here. So let's drop the drum in. Oh yeah, okay. That's good. So, feels good and smooth. This actually shows really well what is actually happening in a slipper clutch. So, as the clutch starts to rotate backwards because of the torque and the force that the tire is now imparting into the engine, it causes the basket itself to actually ride on these ramps on those ball bearings, which is causing it to do this. Super cool. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's check the next steps. Next step is to install what the directions call the disc. And the pictures show it goes installed with this chamfered edge facing up. All right, next it says to put in a couple of the bolts and springs to keep those ball bearings in place while we install the rest of the kit onto the bike. So let's rip this open. 1 and 2 is all that the pictures show. And it also just says to do it on 2. This is temporary, so I'm not going to do any Loctite. The next step is to install our actual clutch basket here. And it's going to slide on, hopefully. Pretty smooth. Oh yeah, very nice, okay. So that has slid on, and then the next step is to install this flange. This was on the OEM clutch, so check the parts that you removed. And it slides on just like that. Perfect. Next up is to reinstall the OEM nut. This is the same one that came off during our disassembly. I wiped it down pretty good to get as much of the oil off of it as I could. All right. That one's a little bit tough to get started. All right, so the Ducabike directions say to tighten this center nut down to 190 Newton meters. Problem I have is that my socket will not get there with these springs here in place. Pretty sure that I can remove them now. All right. So I might have been worried about nothing. It appears once the nut is on here that the ball bearings are locked in place. All right, so to torque this nut down to 190 Newton meters, I need a way to actually secure the inner clutch basket here from spinning. The outer basket doesn't spin, but the inner one does. Now there are tools to actually to lock this into place, although I've been having a hard time finding one that's in stock anywhere for this bike. And besides that, I'm already this far into it. I don't want to wait for it to be ordered anyway. So I thought I might be able to make my own tool to hold it. So I actually grabbed one of the old friction, the metal disc plates from the original clutch, because I'm replacing the new clutch, or the old clutch with new clutch, with the friction pads and the metal discs. So this is no longer useful. So I just grabbed my welder and I welded on a little piece of scrap metal here, a little nub. What that's going to do is slide in. I think I need to go backwards. Hopefully what that's going to do is exactly what the dedicated tool will do. There we go. Which is lock into these teeth on the inner basket. about like that, and keep it from spinning. So, sits in there like that. This interfaces over here. Interfaces here with this outer clutch basket, so it's going to keep it from spinning. Hopefully. Now that that is hopefully locked in place, and I should say, don't think that you have to do this in order to do this clutch job yourself. Just know that you will need to get the appropriate, it's called a clutch basket holding tool. They are available around, but like I said, they've just been out of stock everywhere or weeks and weeks away. So I went down this path. So now that we've got the basket locked, let's go ahead and set our torque wrench to 190 Newton meters. All right, there's 30. Well, now I've got another issue of the engine wants to turn over. Stand by. All right, guys, I am fully aware this is not the right way to do this. You can go buy the housing tool that locks it in place and spend the $150 for that. A lot of people don't even hold it. They just use a leather glove and an impact gun to really just hammer this home. But I want to check the torque. I want to make sure it's tight enough. This is a pretty critical bolt here, or nut. So the way that I am doing this, and the way I've done it a few times now, is I'm using this this wrench. It's actually a shock adjuster wrench. It holds onto the outer basket here, and then you can just barely wedge it and get it connected behind this swing arm pivot here. If you do that, it's going to take that rotational force and let you actually torque this down. All right, so there we go. So it interlocks there in the teeth, and then I use the shock adjustment tool right there. It's going to hold it nice and steady. I think I can actually pull, yeah. So for this process, I'm going to pull this ring off just for a moment, because it's going to allow me to get a better purchase there on that nut. $192. All right, so now I'm going to put this Ducabike ring back in now that that nut there is torqued. Got my new clutch here. It's been soaking in oil. Very important when you're putting this together. One of your clutch friction discs is going to be different. See how the one on the left is a little bit smaller? Find the one that is different and put it to the side. That's got to go in the right order. The rest of them, I should say, this is a Barnett clutch too. So there may be some slight differences between what they look like from brand to brand, but mine are all the same except for that one. So the first step to assembling the actual clutch pads is to put in a friction disc. Next is a steel ring. Next, we're going to grab our two thin rings. This was OEM, so did not come with the new clutch. You'll notice one of them is flat and one of them is concaved. We want to put the flat washer in, or the flat ring in first, followed by the concaved one with the dish facing towards us. So concave out. After those steel rings, we put in our one friction disc that's different than the rest. The Ducabike instructions call this the straight disc, I believe. S-T-R-A-I-T. They're referring to this. So grab this one. It's the one that is not like the rest of your friction discs, and it will go in next. You'll know you did that right because it actually slides over top of those two rings that you just put in previously. Next is going to be a steel ring. Followed by another friction disc. Next, another steel disc, another friction disc, followed by another steel ring, followed by another friction disc, followed by a steel ring, and another friction disc, and a steel ring. Another friction disc, another steel ring, another friction disc, another steel ring. All right, two more. It's another friction disc. Okay, next. The Ducabike instructions say to insert the pin into your pressure plate. This pin had to be pressed out of the original pressure plate from the OEM clutch. I used a socket and a hammer to push it out, and same thing, a larger socket to push it in. Just make sure that you have a socket that is sitting on top of this outside race here of the bearing when you push it in, so that you're not putting pressure and damaging the actual bearing itself. We're ready to install this. The instructions are very unclear at this point. It says, I quote, "Insert the pin into the pressure plate and included ball, 6 millimeters. I believe we're going to find out that it means to take this 6 millimeter ball bearing, which was included with the Ducabike kit, and I believe it means to drop it in there, in the pin, in the middle of that hole there, and then use that Next up, now that we have our pressure plate installed, we need to put the inner springs on. 1, 2, 3. I'm only putting 3 on. The directions say you can do either 3 or 6. It recommends 6 for street riding and 3 for race. I believe what it does is having fewer springs allows the slipper action to work more, which would be more beneficial in a track environment. So I believe so, but we'll try it out. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to do 3 here, and then of course over top of them we put the external spring. All 6 of them. Now we have those in, grab your hardware that came in with Ducabike kit. Comes with new spring keepers, our caps here, and new bolts. These are 4mm bolts. Some Loctite on those will help make sure that they stay in. Okay, so we have all 6 of them in now. We need to torque them to the right spec, but I'm just gonna tighten them the rest of the way just so they go snug. All right, so each of these needs to be torqued to 5 Newton meters. 5 Newton meters is not a lot. It is about 45 inch-pounds. So I've got my small torque wrench here. 45 inch-pounds is all we're gonna get here. Done. Done. And that's it. 45 inch-pounds is all you need for these. Now that we have those springs torqued down, we can check out that the actuation is working as we expect. I'm going to pull the clutch in now, and you see that the clutch pressure plate pushes out, releasing pressure on those inner friction discs. So as I push the clutch in and out, you see that is moving freely and looks correct. So I think we're doing a good job. So if you're like me and every time you take the clutch case cover off, this gear that goes right here falls off. That's not a problem, but you want to make sure that it goes back together correctly. I found this diagram in my shop manual, and it says to do the pin first. It sits in there nicely. Next, you do this bushing. It sits in there flush. Next, you have this bearing. The gear itself is going to go over the bearing. So line it up with the teeth of this gear up here and slide it on. And then last, you put this thin washer on. Now all of that is going to line up with the clutch cover when we reinstall it. But now that you have that in place correctly, we can keep moving on. We are ready to start putting the clutch case cover back on. I've gone through, cleaned up and wiped down, try to get as much oil off of these mating surfaces as I could. It's tough for sure, but get what you can. I'm going to be using the Permatex Ultra Red, just regular old gasket maker, high temp from O'Reilly's. I've used this before. I've also used their faster drawing stuff and it worked just fine. Going to start by laying out a bead all the way around the outside here of this clutch cover. All right, so my camera died, so you missed it, but I waited about an hour and a half, and I went around and torqued all the bolts around the outside of this engine case here. As you do that, you'll see a lot of the gasket maker that we just put on there kind of ooze out. That's what it's supposed to do. I also finished up buttoning up or putting the exhaust back on. You got the springs reattached here. I reinserted my oil drain plug, and on the other side I also replaced the oil filter. I'm not going to show you how I did that in this video. There's plenty of videos that already show that. Now I am going to continue buttoning everything up. Next up, I'm going to put the rear set on and then start pulling the rest of this into place. Make sure it's all zip tied nice and tidy. And we'll wait overnight, and I will wait until tomorrow night before I put oil in it, just to give that gasket a good 24 hours to really sit there and dry before I put oil on it. So with that, I'm going to start putting the rear set on and get it back to almost running. All right, guys, so of course I get to the end of this editing and realize I didn't really conclude with the results. So here it is. After I got everything back together, I did one track day and everything is working perfectly. I can really feel that slipper clutch action on downshifts and when decelerating from high speed, and I like the feel of it a lot. You can really feel it doing its job. So highly recommend that if you're into aggressive riding, track days, racing, whatever it may be. I will say this installation was not terribly difficult, although the instructions that come with Ducabike, the kit, make it very tough. I had to do a lot of research to get to the point of having a functional clutch. The first couple times that I put it together, I did not do it correctly. And that is why you'll see in this video, a lot of the steps are cut together. All the steps outlined in this video are the correct steps. If you follow exactly as I did it in this video, you're going to have a successful installation. You can pretty much ignore the paper instructions that come with the kit. So with that, if you liked the video, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and I will see you in the next video.